Hey there, I'm Oscar, and I created an app called Sol, which is, as you can see, a floating panel app. It's a spotlight replacement. And there was a lot of things that I had to learn on my own, and I thought it was a good idea to kind of dump some of the knowledge that I gained while building this app. So today I would like to talk about NSWindow and some of the quirky behaviors and some of the stuff that you can achieve when using this native Mac element. So the reason I wanted to talk about this today is because I'm actually thinking about moving away from the native code, from NSWindow pure native Swift implementation, into JavaScript implementation. So there are some downsides to this, but I'll talk about them later. So first, I think I will show you the code for an NSWindow. So basically, every window that you interact on Mac is an NS window. There are a few other elements, for example, an NS panel, but they all have the basic same concept, right? An NS window is the visual element where you can just place UI elements for your application. Now, the NS window has a bunch of very interesting properties. So, for example, it does have a level, which could be analogous if you're a web developer to a set index. The main difference, though, is that you have certain predefined levels for your UI elements. So here you can see this is on Swift. You have the main menu, screensaver, submenu, pop-up menu, status bar, floating model panel, normal, and so on and so forth, right? So depending on where you place your window, it will appear above other elements on the screen. And then you have some other properties which are fairly self-explanatory. For example, the title visibility, right? So if you see a normal app window, for example, what can I show you? VS Code, for example, right? Like VS Code has the title of the window here above, so you can set that programmatically directly from the code. Normal macOS Windows do have a title bar. You can make that transparent. You can make it movable or not. You can make it draggable on the background or only on the title bar, and so on and so forth, right? So you can put an opacity and blah, blah, blah. There are many properties one can change in this window. So I would like to explain today how I managed to get this window working, which is basically the Spotlight analogous window, right? There are some quirky behaviors in there that are not fairly easy to understand, and also, there's a hidden behavior in there which is not documented on the Apple documentation. So I thought it would be a good idea to just dump this knowledge. So the first thing I would like to talk about is the frosted glass effect, which I don't know if you can notice too much, but the window that I have in here does have the frosted glass effect, and there's actually a bunch of stuff in here which, if you are trying to build a native macOS app, you will run into some of the issues that I did, which is basically how to get this working, right? So here was some of the stuff that I was talking about. So you have title visibility, you can hide the title bar completely. But here's the interesting part, right? So this is kind of the frosted glass effect that you can see on many macOS apps, including Xcode, for example. Here you can see it also has some transparency. And one can apply this visual effect using this NS visual effect view. So basically, you start your NS window, and then you create this NS visual effect view, and you put it inside of your NS window content, so to say. And then macOS takes care of blending it and making the background transparent. So this visual effect has materials, right? So you can have appearance-based, dark, ultra dark, light, medium light. And then you have some other stuff like menus, popover, selection, sidebar, title bar. So different elements of macOS have different opacities. Um, so you can play around. This is a very good page. It's just a GitHub repository with the examples of this frosted glass effect. You can play around. You can try setting them, and it also goes into some of the more putting a corner radius in there, and so on and so forth. So basically, if you're trying to make any complex app or something that looks very good on macOS, you will be spending some time trying to understand how these things work, right? Like you have to set, for example, if you want the content of your view to take all of the window, including the title bar, um, you need to insert this full size content view. So let's talk about that one actually, about the style masks. So besides setting some of these properties, there are also some behaviors you can customize only through this style mask um, property inside of the NSWindow, or in this case, the NS panel. You have title, full-size content view, non-activating panel. This is what I'm using for my example, but for example, there's borderless, there's closable, and so on and so forth, right? So each one of these values is going to modify the behavior in some way. So for example, if I don't put this closable in here, the close button might still be displayed, but it's not going to be clickable. It's going to be deactivated. Now, the interesting part to get the spotlight window working is actually these two, the title and the non-activating panel. So the non-activating panel, what it does is that, I don't know if you can see it, but it kind of allows it to gain focus without fully bringing the application that you were working on on the background, right? So there are some concepts, it's like a little bit on web, like having the focus on an element. On macOS, you actually have two different keys. One is the key window and one is the main window. So the key window, if I'm not mistaken, is the one that has the user interaction focus, and the main window is the one that's presented in the front at the moment. So the non-activating panel, what it allows you, if this wasn't here, we can actually try it. If this is not here and then I open the window, the main window of the application, what it would do, it would put the Xcode editor, it would take the key away from it. So then when I close it, or I automatically close it, so to say, the user would have to click again to make this window regain the focus, the key element from macOS itself. So this is taking a little bit to compile, but that's the basic gist of it. Now here's one very quirky behavior. In order for this to work, the window needs to be titled, right? Like this is not documented anywhere at all. This is just one of those things that it just is. So don't ask me why, right? There's funny macOS behaviors, and there's a lot of old bugs in there. It's just like that. And then you have the full size content view, which makes all of the window usable to whatever I put inside of it. Okay, so let's move to some of the other properties. So the collection behavior is a very interesting one. The collection behavior is a property that affects how your application interacts with certain parts of macOS. One of them is I don't remember how this is called. This view, for example, if you say it can join all spaces, it means that the app. No, sorry, I'm not this one. Yeah, the collection behavior, for example, means that this can join all spaces means you can open the app on any focus window, right? Or any focus workspace desktop. So if I move from one desktop to the other, this window, I can just put it anywhere. The contrary with this would be it can only appear on the main window, which might be useful for if some app that needs to remain on the main and the main screen that macOS uses. This one, for example, the full screen auxiliary means that if I have an app which is on full screen mode, this can still pop up on top of it, which is usually not the usual behavior, right? If you have a full screen app, no other app in theory is allowed to appear on top of it. So there are a bunch of stuff in here in the collection behavior. You can join all application, all spaces. Ignore cycle, for example, is the one that I wanted to show you. It doesn't appear on this view when you try to see all of the open windows, but because this is an NS panel, this doesn't work anyways, right? If this was an NS window, then it would change the behavior of the window, but doesn't really matter. Cool. So there are a bunch of tricks you can do in here to get some of cool stuff running. So for example, I could do this into, turn this into a borderless window just to show you. Let me just show you how that behaves. It's still working. But for example, we could do, well, let's just talk about how to create a floating spotlight window. So this is the basic. I already mentioned we need to have this non-activated panel. It needs to be titled. And that will kind of allow the window that I'm using to replicate the spotlight behavior to kind of float above everything else. So now the thing is, or the thing that I'm looking for is whenever this window gains focus, I need to put it in front of all the other stuff. But the moment this window loses the focus, so to say, so the user clicks outside of the panel or I press the escape key, what I want to do is return the key window element to the application that was there before, right? So when pressing the escape key, that's fairly easy. Let me just, I have this hide window function that I have bind to my escape key. So whenever the user presses it, I just tell my main window to, you know, go out of the display stack, right? That's fairly straightforward, nothing too complex about it. But now the problem is I want this to happen also when the user just clicks outside of the focus window, right? So now, right now I can just click, nothing will happen because there is no clickable elements on my window. But what happens when I click outside, then it should automatically close itself. So there I use a trick. Well, it's not really a trick, but it's just the way you do it, right? So on your base class, you need to extend another class, which is the window delegate, right? So if you're not very familiar with macOS programming, the delegate pattern is something that's used very, very often. Basically, a delegate is, as its name suggests, a delegate for the object that you're manipulating. So if you subclass the delegate, you will be able to override some of the methods which are called by macOS itself whenever an event happens, and you cannot react to them. So basically on my panel class, what I added the NSWindow delegate class, and then I implemented the window did resign key. So this is the event that gets called whenever the window or the user clicks on something else, does some sort of behavior that tells you that this window no longer has the keyboard focus or the main OS focus. So I basically hijack this event, you could say, and I tell my application it should hide the window. So that gets me this behavior, very nice behavior, where um, whenever something happens, um, then my window automatically closes. But now the thing you will see is that it not only closes, but it actually keeps the key or the whatever event that has happened, right? Which is the behavior that you get with Spotlight as well. Um, it's not enough to just close the window and then having to click again or something. It's just annoying for the user with some of these use cases. So this is a very nice pattern, a very nice way to get this behavior. And now there are other things which are more React Native specific. Um, just small tricks. If you are only interested on the native part of the thing, then you could stop watching right now. But so let me just show you the initialization code. So I have here my panel. I initialize it with a specific size and height. And here's the code for the blurred background, like I told you. I'm using a hot window. So now there I do have a little bit of a problem, which is I'm not able to replicate exactly a Spotlight. I think Spotlight, this floating panel window is using some private API. So I can only kind of get close to it with this blending mode. I assume that if you or any app that's using this public APIs will also not be able to replicate it 100%. There are some apps out there which use this transparency nowadays. It just feels very native at Mac. So Linear, for example, does this. Um, but so I initialize my panel window. I create my visual effect view. And then, like I told you before, you need to set it as the content view so that macOS will just put it on the background. So now here comes a little bit about specifics on React Native. So if you don't know how React Native works, basically React Native runs on a single view, right? So React Native is not, you can embed a small part which is written on React Native inside of a larger app. This is true for iOS, this is true for Android, this is also true for macOS. So once I have set the content view of my main window, which I have told it, okay, this is this visual effect, which is again just a view. All I'm doing is basically I'm taking my React Native root view, this element, and I'm just adding it, but not to the window, right? Because now it's kind of stuck. I have my panel, I have my visual effect, and then comes my React Native view. Then I just kind of have to play around with the auto resizing mask because I want the React Native view to automatically fill all the space of this sub view. So this actually took me quite a lot of time to get right because it's not straightforward, right? Like if you don't program with macOS, you might not realize how the views resize with each other, and iOS and macOS, they have this funny constraint system. It's just confusing, right? So basically, by using this auto resizing mask, you're just telling it whatever view is in there, you put in there, just take the space. Which is, if you're not a macOS developer and you just want to get your React Native view in there, this is perfect. This is what you want. So there is also a small problem with doing this on React Native. So on iOS and on Android, your app is just a single window, so to say, right? And you don't really close windows on iOS or on Android. You kind of minimize them, and then the OS is going to take care of doing stuff to it. But basically, you can only have one focused app at the same time. On macOS and desktop systems, that's not true, right? You could spawn multiple windows, each one with React Native instance, which is very powerful. But at the same time, it does create one problem, which is basically it takes a little bit of time for React Native to start, because you can close this window, can reopen it, and then you have to reinitialize this root view, right? So unlike a native view, it needs to load the JavaScript engine, it needs to load your code, blah, blah, blah. So it takes a little bit of time, which might not be a problem depending on how heavy your app is, but you might have some delay. And the thing with Sol is that I also implemented jumping straight to different parts of the app, right? So you not only start with this basic view, which is the search or the main component that loads. You can also have an emoji picker, for example, right? So here you can see there's a little bit of delay um, between me opening the window and React Native kind of reacting to the change. Because basically what I need to do is I get the hotkey event on the native side and I need to send it to React Native and be like, hey, the user press this key, move to this particular view, and I need to wait a little bit until React Native kind of does this, sending the message, parsing it, changing the view before showing the window. So here is kind of the dumb workaround that I did, which was kind of working, but right now it's not because I guess my machine is a little bit overloaded. Yeah, so I just increase the time here a little bit until it works. So basically, I just wait for 300 milliseconds to just give the window a little bit of time to switch views before showing the window, right? So here, the key is, again, this very complicated Mac behaviors. You can put a window on front of everything and still make it invisible, which is very confusing, right? Because now you have the main window concept, the key window concept, and the visibility concept. So you might also have a level in there. So there are a lot of things that macOS does, right? I don't know if it's legacy. I wouldn't call it necessarily incorrect, but there are a lot of mixed concepts. So basically what I do is I just tell this window, I just set it as invisible. I open it because I also have to reposition it depending on which screen the window has open. I need to reposition it. And if I show it immediately, then I just have troubles, right? So basically the window is there, it's not immediately visible while I resize it. And once I finish it, resizing it, then I put it in front of the user and then I make it visible again, right? So one of these weird tricks, also because I need to give React Native a little bit of time to resize and do its entire magic thing. But that's basically it. So the basic result, and there are there's a bit more code floating in there, but the end result is a spotlight window, which is very nice if you ever want to create a tool like this. It's also very similar to the Command K tools. But I thought it was very interesting to try to replicate this without having all the access Spotlight has to the native APIs. I'm guessing Raycast also does something similar. Alfred also does something similar. But yeah, it's completely doable from the user space API, so to say. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video and have fun.